one of the things I want to talk about, I guess, is Robin Dunbar's book. Uh, was it Grooming Gossip and the Origin of Language, the Evolution of Language? And it's a good book. I really like Dunbar's stuff. I think that it provides a lot of useful information, and it does set some wonderful context for understanding group size, group dynamics, growth of the brain, the way that the anatomy of the body is related to, all kinds of different factors came together to make for the evolution of language. It wasn't just simply the hand or the chest or the larynx or the brain, but a conspiring of many features. And it really is a great book. I think one of the problems, though, that I have with, and I still have, I can't shake it, is the reductionism of evolutionary biology as they're trying to account for why people are as they are or why people do as they do. And there's just so many cases where it's as useful as it is and as insightful as it is to try to understand our origins and to try to see humans as the product of a slow evolutionary process that's related to and similar to lots of different kinds of primates, not so much gorillas but more chimpanzees, and not monkeys. So there's all these little different divisions. But I think part of the problem, the residual problem, is that the more that we try to go back and understand ourselves in terms of our origins, the more that we cover over how we've become who we are. And by that I mean literate, technologically geared. Now, again, we could say, well, who is the we there? And I guess that's part of the problem. Part of the problem is when people give evolutionary biology explanations, they make it seem as if there is, it's as if culture never happened, or as if if we would try to redesign cultures and take, if every culture would say, wow, we're just a product of natural evolution, let's redesign our culture to bring ourselves into alignment with our origin, that would amount to a denial of the accomplishment of culture. See, I mean, there's something that's kind of odd about us taking our lead from our origins. And I wonder if, to what extent is it the sign of the kind of the eclipse or the sunset phase of Western culture, that we increasingly look toward our past. We increasingly try to understand who we are in terms of where we've been, how we've come along, where it was we've gone in order to get where we currently are. But if you ask people, what does the future look like? What exactly does the future hold? I don't know. People, they seem to have a lot less ahead of them, at least in vision or in terms of prospects, than behind them. We're much more aware, increasingly, in just say the last 30 or 40 years, the focus on evolutionary biology and the focus on trying to understand ourselves in terms of our past, in terms of our potential future, and in terms of where we're going. I mean, I think it is interesting. And on a very related front, I think it's this issue of, to what extent is it possible to simply describe things without shaping who we become in the process? See, I think there seems to be a belief in a detached posture. Like, people are one thing and they're over here, and then the world is another thing over there. And then as you're describing the world and talking about it, you can remain unaffected in the process. And I don't think that that's the case, and it's as if people are underestimating how they're impacting themselves, shaping themselves, becoming who they're becoming as they understand themselves as they do. There's a line by Abraham Heschel where he says the truth of a theory of man is either creative or irrelevant, but never merely descriptive. We become what we think of ourselves. And I think that that's a crucial point, that we're more than just describing ourselves, that we're achieving a kind of self-understanding in the process of understanding the world, and that self-understanding is really a self-accomplishment. That is, we're accomplishing a particular kind of self in the process of trying to talk about the world and get clear on the world and understand the world, I guess, a little bit better. And to what extent could people become increasingly aware of how they're impacting themselves in their self-understanding? And maybe I'll just end with, this is a little bit from Georg Simmel, where he's talking about part of the problem of the way we think about truth and the way that we think about language and the way that we think about selves, and that we seem to, I guess, underestimate the role that the creative capacity or the generative capacity in speech is moving us, and instead we think of things very literally. We have a kind of literalist infection of imagining language as a neutral tool where we're completely untarnished, unaffected, unimpacted, right? We're left without any influence as we talk about things. Like, even take a simple example. If some person says, if I bring in a person from a different culture, maybe a really radically different culture, and some person says, oh, that person, they smell, or they're dressed oddly. When the person is describing that other person, they're saying more about themselves than they are about that person they're describing. They're constructing and legitimating, and they're deepening and entrenching their own values, their beliefs, their cultural sensibilities. So it seems like oftentimes people think they're just talking about the world without confirming the very minds that they have. And it has to do with, how could one understand the relationship between world and language such that in our attempts to talk about it, we realize how we're shaping ourselves along the process, or along the way in that process. Okay, so here's Simmel. He says, in a fable, a peasant on his deathbed tells his children that there is treasure buried in his field. Thereupon they dig deeply all over the field without finding the treasure. The next year, however, the field prepared in this way yields a triple harvest. This symbolizes the line of metaphysics indicated here. We will not find the treasure, but the world we have dug through the search of it will bring a triple harvest of the spirit, even if in reality there was no treasure at all, but only the fact that this excavation is the necessary and inner determination of our minds. Okay, thanks.